The evening of 15th of July 2009 begins like any other workday for most of Kuala Lumpur, but inside the MACC Selangor headquarters, the atmosphere already feels heavier than the humid air outside. Fluorescent lights hum overhead as officers shuffle case files, walk briskly between desks, or disappear behind frosted glass doors, where interviews stretch long into the night. At around 5 p.m, a young political aide steps into the building. 30-year-old Teoh Beng Hock, dressed simply, carrying nothing more than what he brought for work. His wedding is days away. Tomorrow morning he is supposed to register his marriage. But right now, what the MACC wants from him cannot wait. He signs in, no lawyer beside him, no phone allowed inside the questioning room, just himself, and a request to assist in an investigation involving alleged misuse of state funds. But in less than 20 hours, Teoh will never walk out of this building again, and the final hours of his life will become one of Malaysia's most contested mysteries. The interrogation begins. Officers move him between rooms, asking about documents, signatures, and approval processes. Teoh cooperates. He has no criminal charges, no reason to fear he won't be home tonight. But as the minutes blur into hours, the sky outside darkens and the MACC office grows quieter. By midnight, most government buildings across the city have shut their doors. MACC Selangor hasn't. Witnesses later recall seeing him around this time, tired, slumped, still answering questions. There is no sign of aggression, no argument, no public confrontation, only exhaustion. And yet, this is where the timeline begins to fracture, where hours go missing, statements contradict, and the last confirmed moments of Teoh's life become unsettlingly vague. Sometime past 3 a.m, multiple officers reported seeing him lying on a sofa inside the MACC office. Not restrained, not locked up, just collapsed from what they describe as hours of questioning. He is still alive, still inside the building, still waiting to go home, but no one calls his family. No one suggests postponing the session, and no one anticipates the national storm that will erupt the next day. Before we go deeper, if you want more real-life investigations just like this, cases that changed nations, hit subscribe. It helps us keep uncovering stories exactly like this one. The hours between 3:30 a.m. and sunrise are the black hole of this case, a span of time that will later be dissected in courtrooms, commissions, protests, and parliamentary debates. According to official statements, Teoh was resting. The interrogation had ended. Officers continued their work elsewhere, but what happens next has no witnesses. No CCTV inside the rooms. No footage showing movement along the corridors. No record of anyone entering the room to check on him. At 6 a.m, MACC officers say they saw him in the same area, still alive, still inside the building. This is the last confirmed sighting of Teoh Beng Hock alive. What he did next, no one can say for certain. And this missing time, these 3 quiet hours between night and morning, will later become the foundation of every question Malaysians demand answers to. By late morning, staff begin their routine shifts, files move, officers arrive, interrogations resume elsewhere. But for reasons that have never been fully explained, no one notices that Teoh is no longer visible in any part of the 14th floor. There is no record of him walking out the front door. No witness reports seeing him leave. His personal belongings, phone, wallet and bag, are still in the interview room. Everything he brought into the MACC office is untouched. And yet, Teoh himself is gone. A man about to register his marriage simply vanishes inside a government building, without a trace, without a witness, without an explanation. Around 1 p.m. on the 16th of July 2009, staff in the adjacent building noticed something strange on the 5th floor rooftop. A figure lying motionless, face up, injuries indicating a fall from height. Emergency responders arrive. MACC officers gather. News spreads through the building with the speed of a shockwave. The body is identified. It is Teoh Beng Hock. The silence that descends on the MACC office is immediate and devastating. Officers begin to close off the area. Phones ring across the city. Politicians are alerted. Family members are notified. And the public soon learns that the witness who walked into a government building the night before has been found dead less than 24 hours later. And here is the question that has haunted Malaysia since that day. How did he fall? A man entering a building alive, cooperative, tired, expecting to go home, and being found dead on a rooftop the next afternoon. Everything after this, the protests, the autopsies, the contradictions, the political firestorm, begins with one haunting truth. Teoh Beng Hock walked into the MACC Selangor headquarters, and he never walked out. The news spreads through the MACC building like a spark hitting dry grass. A body has been found on the 5th floor rooftop of the adjoining podium block. Officers rush toward the scene. Some freeze at the edge of the doorway. Others stare from the window above, trying to make sense of what they're seeing. A man lying face up, motionless, with injuries visible even from a distance. The air is still, too still. When investigators descend to the rooftop, the identification happens quickly. It is Teoh Beng Hock, a political aide, a witness under MACC care, a man scheduled to register his marriage the next morning. And within minutes, the question every Malaysian will ask for years to come begins forming in the air. How does a witness die inside a government building? Officers move to secure the area, but information is already leaking. Journalists pick up whispers from government staff. Phones ring inside political offices. Teoh's family begins receiving calls no one should ever receive. Within the hour, the story hits national television. At first, the details sound impossible. A man questioned through the night is suddenly found dead outside the building. His belongings, his phone, his wallet, his bag are still inside the interview room. And yet somehow, he ended up 5 floors below an open window. What makes the situation even more explosive is what's missing, the one thing that could have clarified everything. CCTV footage. There are no cameras inside the interrogation rooms, none in the key corridors, none captured the moment Teoh left the 14th floor, none showing a fall. For a modern government facility, the absence is staggering. In the hours that follow, details begin to harden into a timeline. Not a complete one, but enough to ignite outrage. Teoh was last seen alive at 3:30 a.m., lying on a sofa. Officers claim he was resting, not being interrogated. By 6 a.m., they say he was no longer being questioned. His personal items were still in the MACC office. No officer reports seeing him exit the building. And then 1 p.m., he is found dead on the rooftop. The contradictions fuel suspicion. The silence fuels anger. By late afternoon, outside the MACC building, citizens begin gathering. Journalists, political party members, and ordinary Malaysians who feel something is deeply wrong. They chant for transparency. They demand answers. They ask why a man under state care ended up dead with no witnesses. This isn't just a tragedy, it's a crisis. Because if a witness can die during an investigation, what does that say about the system he walked into? As camera crews arrive, MACC officers attempt to respond. Spokespersons insist Teoh was free to leave. They state he was not detained. They emphasize that he was helping voluntarily, but every statement leads to the same question. If he were free to leave, why didn't anyone see him go? Inside the building, investigators begin interviewing MACC officers. Statements are collected. Rooms are sealed. But outside, the story is already spiraling, gaining force with every passing minute. Political parties issue press statements calling for accountability. Social media explodes, people asking why a healthy, soon-to-be-married young man would harm himself. Eyewitness testimony of officers seeing Teoh alive earlier in the morning only complicates the picture, and when his family arrives to identify the body, the tragedy becomes painfully human. His fiancée breaks down. His siblings demand answers. His parents stare at the rooftop, devastated and confused. Nothing about the scene suggests closure. Everything suggests questions. Before we continue, if you want more deep, fact-driven investigations like this one, the type the mainstream rarely covers in full, hit subscribe. It helps us bring more untold cases to light. As evening falls, protests intensify. Malaysians gather in multiple cities. Candlelight vigils appear within hours. Crowds raise banners calling for justice, demanding accountability, and refusing to accept vague explanations. The public's anger is focused on one fact. Teoh wasn't a suspect. He wasn't under arrest. He wasn't charged with anything. He was a witness, and witnesses are supposed to be protected, not placed at risk. Government leaders step forward, attempting to manage the fallout. Calls for an independent investigation start gaining momentum. The questions grow sharper. Why was Teoh questioned through the night? Why were his personal items left behind? Why wasn't he escorted if he was free to leave? Why is there no final sighting of him alive? And most importantly, what exactly happened between 6 a.m. and 1 p.m.? These unanswered gaps begin turning a mysterious death into a national crisis. And as the pressure mounts, investigators realize the truth won't be found in statements or timelines alone. It lies in two critical areas: the injuries on Teoh's body and the conduct inside MACC that night. Autopsy teams begin the first examination. Evidence from the rooftop is collected. Officers secure the interview room where Teoh's belongings were found exactly as he left them. Everything becomes potential evidence. Every minute becomes critical. And yet, even now, as the country demands transparency, MACC's internal timeline remains full of contradictions, the kind that turn confusion into suspicion. By midnight, the death of Teoh Beng Hock had become the #1 story in Malaysia. Politicians call for resignations, legal experts debate possible scenarios, activists and citizens flood social media with outrage. But beneath the noise and anger lies one stark, irrefutable truth. A man entered a government building alive. He left it dead, and no one can yet explain how. The hours after Teoh Beng Hock's body was discovered turned Malaysia into a country holding its breath. Because if the fall killed him, the question now is what happened before he went out that window. And that answer begins with the autopsies. The first autopsy takes place within hours. Government pathologists conclude that Teoh suffered multiple injuries from a fall from height. But when they break down the trauma, something stands out. There are marks on his neck. There are abrasions on his ribs, and some bruises don't align perfectly with a clean vertical drop. This fuels the first major hook for investigators. Were these injuries from the fall, or from something that happened inside the MACC office before the fall? That single question starts a storm. Because if the injuries are inconsistent, then the official narrative begins to shift. And if the narrative shifts, accountability must follow. But the first autopsy doesn't provide enough clarity. So, under pressure from the public, the government authorizes a second autopsy, this time with foreign pathologists present. What happens next only deepens the mystery. The second autopsy agrees with the first. Teoh died from a fall. But that's where the agreement ends. When foreign experts examine the neck wound, they claim it resembles pre-fall trauma, possibly a sign of manual force, not suicide. They also note unusual fractures, ones that usually don't appear in voluntary jumps. And suddenly, the question becomes sharper. Was Teoh conscious when he fell? Because if he wasn't, then Malaysia is no longer looking at a fall, it's looking at something else entirely. By this point, Malaysians have taken to the streets. Lawyers demand a public inquiry. Politicians accuse the MACC of negligence, or worse. In response, the government forms the Royal Commission of Inquiry, the RCI. This is where the case stops being a mystery and starts becoming a battle. Inside the RCI hearing room, witnesses describe a night of intense questioning. Some officers admit Teoh faced hours of uninterrupted interrogation. Others confirm the practice of using pressure tactics, psychological and verbal strategies meant to weaken a witness. One officer even describes a technique known internally as flying squad, where multiple interrogators rotate in rapid sequence to exhaust the person being questioned. The commissioners later call these methods unprofessional, harsh, and oppressive. So now a heavier question appears. If the pressure was so intense, what exactly did Teoh go through between midnight and sunrise? We know the timeline. Seen lying on the sofa at 3:30 a.m. Claimed to be resting at 6 a.m., body found around 1 p.m. What we don't know is what happened in those hours, for which no one can account. And the RCI tries to answer this, but its conclusion divides a nation. After reviewing testimony, the commissioners present their official finding. Teoh Beng Hock died by suicide, caused by oppressive, relentless interrogation. A conclusion meant to close the case, but instead, it explodes it, because his family rejects the finding immediately. Their lawyers reject it, independent pathologists reject it, and soon entire communities reject it too. Why? Because the evidence does not fully support suicide. Not the injuries, not the circumstances, not the timeline, and not the fact that Teoh had no history of mental instability, no note, no behavior indicating self-harm, and was preparing for his wedding registration the next morning. If you're watching this and you want to follow more deep dive breakdowns like this, hit the subscribe button now. It helps more than you think, and it makes sure you never miss the next episode. Now back to the case. The RCI's findings become even more controversial after the release of independent forensic reviews. Foreign experts review photographs, injury reports, and autopsy notes. Their conclusion? The pattern of fractures, especially around the skull and ribs, raises the possibility that Teoh may have been unconscious or incapacitated before the fall, meaning he would not have been able to brace, twist, or instinctively protect himself, meaning the fall could have been staged. If Teoh didn't jump, and if he couldn't resist, then who was with him in those final moments? This is the question Malaysia can't escape. Then comes the biggest contradiction of the entire inquiry. The RCI concludes suicide, but the Court of Appeal, years later, concludes the opposite, that Teoh did not kill himself. 2 official bodies, 2 opposite verdicts, 1 dead man, and 0 accountability. Inside the RCI transcript, one moment stands out. A senior MACC officer, when asked why Teoh was not allowed to leave, answers, "He was a witness. He was needed." But that's exactly the problem. Witnesses are supposed to be protected, not interrogated until dawn, not left unmonitored, not found dead. So was this negligence, or was it something more deliberate? The evidence remains contradictory, the testimonies remain disputed, the official narratives remain in conflict. But one fact, one cold, immovable fact, cuts through all the confusion. Teoh Beng Hock walked into the MACC building alive, and he never walked out. More than a decade has passed since Teoh Beng Hock fell from the 14th floor of the MACC building. But in Malaysia, his name hasn't faded. If anything, it has grown louder, because time has done nothing to soften the questions his death created. And the biggest shift occurs in 2014, when the Court of Appeal delivers a ruling that changes everything. They overturn the idea of suicide. They overturn the narrative that the RCI tried to cement. They state directly, Teoh Beng Hock did not kill himself. His death was the result of unlawful acts by person or persons unknown. This isn't just a legal statement, it is an earthquake. Because now, for the first time, the Malaysian justice system draws a clear line. Teoh didn't jump. He didn't fall accidentally. Someone played a role in his death. And if someone was responsible, then why hasn't anyone been named? The ruling forces investigators to reopen the case, a case many officials hoped was buried, sealed, and forgotten. But when it resurfaces, so do the gaps that have never been filled. The new investigation starts by revisiting the timeline. Once again, the same questions hit the table. Who saw him last? Who was responsible for his safety? Who had access to him between 3:30 a.m. and the moment his body was found? This time there is no RCI conclusion to hide behind, no narrative that can be neatly wrapped. Because the Court of Appeal has declared the previous story invalid, and now Malaysians want the truth without filters. The pressure forces the MACC to change. Quietly and then publicly, the agency restructures interrogation protocols, new surveillance requirements, new rules for handling witnesses, new reporting lines. Teoh's death becomes the catalyst for reforms that should have existed long before 2009. Witnesses are now supposed to be monitored at all times. No more leaving someone resting on a sofa overnight. Interrogations must be recorded, timed, and supervised. Systems that were once treated like suggestions are now policies with consequences. But reforms alone don't satisfy anyone, because reforms acknowledge a problem, but they don't solve the crime. Teoh's family continues to push. Civil rights groups continue to demand names. Lawyers insist the reopened investigation must identify who was involved, who failed their duty, and who benefited from the silence that followed. But every time investigators approach the missing hours, every time they try to rebuild the timeline, they hit the same wall. No CCTV, no witness logs, no documented handover. No officer is willing to say, "I was there." The truth is still missing. Just like the accountability, more investigations happen, more statements are taken, even former officers are re-interviewed, but answers remain scarce. Some officers contradict their earlier testimonies. Some timelines don't match. Some details appear for the first time, years too late. This creates a question no official wants to answer. How does a witness end up dead inside a government building, with no officer able or willing to explain what happened? The deeper the inquiry goes, the more the case shifts from mystery to something that resembles a systemic failure. Before we go deeper, if you're following this investigation and you want more episodes like this, hit subscribe right now. It helps a lot, and it makes sure you never miss the next breakdown. Now, back to the case. Even after the Court of Appeal ruling, even after new investigations, even after national attention, even after international scrutiny, no one is charged. The official explanation becomes a shadow. Not quite murder, not quite an accident, not quite negligence, just unknown persons doing unlawful acts, a phrasing that says everything and nothing at once. And that's why Teoh Beng Hock's death doesn't simply sit in Malaysian history as a tragedy. It sits there as a fracture, a break in trust between the public and the institutions meant to protect them. Parents warn their children. Politicians reference the case in speeches. Activists use his name as a reminder that transparency is not optional. Over time, Teoh becomes more than a victim. He becomes a symbol of what happens when power goes unchecked. A symbol of why people fear interrogation rooms. A symbol of how a system can fail someone who walked in only as a witness. And that symbol comes with one final question. One that has haunted Malaysia for 15 years. What happened between 3:30 a.m. and the moment Teoh Beng Hock fell from the 14th floor? Because that window of missing time is the key. Inside those hours lies the entire truth. Inside those hours lies the identity of whoever the Court of Appeal called unknown. But those hours remain locked, unrecorded, unsupported by evidence, and unclaimed by anyone inside the building. In the end, Teoh's story doesn't close, it doesn't resolve, it doesn't fade, because a case without an ending is not a case, it is a wound. And Malaysia carries that wound every year. This question stays unanswered. Who was with Teoh Beng Hock on the 14th floor? Until that answer emerges, his death will never rest in the past. It will remain exactly what it is today, unfinished.